I was like, wait, why am I working for these guys? Like I could totally do this on my own. And literally a week later, I jumped ship and started my own business.
That's the best.
I didn't even have like a name for my business or anything, but she's like, let's start.
You have to like be so obsessed with your business and what you're building that you're like genuinely excited to wake up and build every day. It's like a year after we launched the podcast, 2020. And now we're getting all of these messages from listeners of the podcast. We're hearing, I lost my job. I want to start a business. Can you help? I need to pivot. Can you help? It was a huge risk. And Courtney and I invested a lot of our own money initially in building Entreprenista. Like, how can we help as many women founders as possible, but actually do it at scale? That is how it actually started.
Welcome back to this season of The Climb, a journey where listening to your heart reveals your true potential. With the Intermountain philosophy, on this show, we're here to teach you how to embrace the limitless nature of growth.
Women are reshaping the world, driven by their dreams. Our mission is to empower you to listen to your heart, pursue those dreams, to create a community where women like you can begin the climb to true success together.
In a world of comparisons, reconnect with why your work matters through inspiring stories of female entrepreneurs all around the world.
Discover what it means to build your legacy with authenticity and face your inner challenge with confidence.
Join us on this podcast as we explore how to become fearless, unleashing your true potential for you and your business.
If you choose to accept, your adventure awaits.
Ready to climb your inner mountain? The climb starts now. Hello and welcome to this week's Climb. I'm super excited to have our lovely guest, Stephanie Cartin, co-founder of Entreprenista, amongst many other things, and a very familiar name on this podcast because we've had so many guests that I've met through Entreprenista and are now also members of Intermountain. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. So excited to connect, Natasha.
Amazing. So we have Stephanie Cartin. She is the co-founder of Entreprenista, amongst many other things. But you're also a very familiar name on our podcast because so many of our guests have actually I met through Entreprenista or through you actually. But there are so many directions that our conversation can go. You're an entrepreneur, a podcaster, community builder, an investor, a mom, an amazing friend. And so I am excited to dive into all of this and see where it goes. But first, I'd love to get to know Stephanie more. What is your backstory?
Oh my goodness. So I feel like I was a born entreprenista. I got my start as an entreprenista selling Girl Scout cookies at a very young age, and proud to say my 5-year-old now is a Girl Scout in her first year of selling. And I feel like so much of what I learned back in the day from that Girl Scouts program, like really set the stage and trajectory of my life and our businesses. I just learned so much from that experience. But moving past being a young girl, I actually went to school for hospitality and business management. And while I was at Cornell, it's actually when Facebook first started. And I remember getting access to the platform back then. It was called thefacebook.com. Were you on it then when it first started?
Yeah, interestingly, I was one of the first high schools that was allowed to go on because I'm here in Palo Alto.
Okay,
and so it was the weirdest thing, but I remember the Facebook for sure.
Thefacebook.com. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is literally going to change everything I'm learning about in college. I didn't know exactly quite how back then, but I always was just so interested in it and stayed on the forefront. So fast forward, I graduate from Cornell and I start working in the hospitality industry in sales and marketing, but I was just so fascinated with social media. And then Twitter came out and other platforms were launching. And I started putting together these social media strategies on the side of my full-time job. And I realized very quickly that it wasn't necessarily just an after-work activity. It could be a real business. So my business partner, Courtney, and I, we ended up partnering together to launch a social media agency. It was the very early days of social. We're going back 2010, 2011, and then 2012 is when we finally quit our corporate jobs to launch Socialfly full-time. But that is how our first business actually started. But I feel like all roads led back to selling Girl Scout cookies and all the things that I was selling in the early days. And also the one thing I didn't mention that I think also helped me throughout my career and building businesses was my musical theater background. So I grew up doing a lot of musical theater, and that's initially what I wanted to pursue.
That's amazing. So how do you think that also connects to what it is that you're doing today?
Well, the other thing I will share, aside from, the Girl Scouts program, having a theater background is like the best training for any type of business and really any profession that you're in, because you learn how to talk to people, how to show up on stage, how to communicate, how to connect with people. So another thing, obviously I did with my daughter, got her into musical theater right away at 5 years old as well, because I saw how these things really made an impact when I was a young child. But yeah, I feel like just my background, being able to speak and connect with people and be on stage, like really helped me as we were building our businesses.
That actually doesn't surprise me at all, because when we were at Founders Weekend last May in Orlando and you were on stage and was 150 women, 200 women in there in the audience. And one of the things that we all walked away with was like this energy and feeling of like support. And I mean, it was purely magical. I don't even know how to explain. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. But one of the things that we were talking about was like how we could truly feel it from Courtney. Like it was like your presence on stage, it felt like you were talking to me one-on-one, and it was just totally, totally magical. So that's not surprised that's where it comes from, just being on stage, of course, like duh.
Yeah, and just the connecting. Like I genuinely just like love everyone so much in our community and get so excited just seeing just the connections and the relationships and everything that's happening for everyone. And I just love to connect. And I think, again, I think maybe you're born this way. I feel like I kind of came out of the womb this way. Like I just love being around amazing humans and just seeing everyone connect and win together, because, I say this all the time, like there's enough business and opportunity for everyone. Like there's so much opportunity out there. And the more that we're all able to come to connect together to connect and collaborate, it's like the best thing ever. And I was on like no sleep that weekend because it was so hard. I was so energized. Like I had so much energy going through my body from being there with everyone that I like physically couldn't fall asleep at night because I was like so excited. So I was going on like all of this adrenaline up there.
That was amazing. No, you could feel it. I mean, it truly was magical, and the connections that came from it. I mean, what you're saying is it is all about connection over competition. And that's something that I think so many people strive for, especially in communities, especially communities with women. And you've done such a wonderful job with that, both you and Courtney. And so I guess while we're on the subject of community, how did Entreprenista form? What is the story behind it? Because I've even heard too, like right now, one of the biggest epidemics we have in the world is loneliness, right? And so community is something we're seeing so many more people activating them, growing them, and it's hard to do those. So we'd love to learn from the best, especially as Intermountain, like we're starting, we're a young community, just launched officially last year, and would love to learn like what has made Entreprenista so successful.
Well, congratulations, because there is nothing better and more rewarding and more impactful than bringing a community together. And I know how hard it is, and it's definitely not easy. And I feel like a lot of times, of course, we make it look easy just from all of the great connections and content, everything that you see. But behind the scenes, like the business of building a community isn't as easy, because it's just like building any business, right? And there's so many learning lessons and all these things you have to figure out and learn on the back end. So I'll take you back to how all of the Entreprenista magic started. So Courtney and I, we started building Socialfly initially, like I said, on the side of our full-time jobs. We ended up quitting our corporate jobs on the same day. It was May 4th of 2012, and essentially never looked back, started growing and scaling the agency really organically, doing great work for our clients, being referred to new clients, and really just always practicing what we would preach with our own marketing strategies for the agency. So what happened was we were very quickly number one on Google for social media agency and influencer agency in New York City. And then we got the advice to start applying to awards. And then we started winning awards for our work and for our business. So we now had all of these leads and new business coming in. We were growing the business very quickly. So then what started to happen was, because of this quick growth and success of Socialfly, so many women founders were reaching out to myself and Courtney all the time, wanting to go out to coffee and pick our brains, just wanting to hear how we did it. And me and Courtney, like we literally want to help absolutely everyone, but we hadn't started Entreprenista at the time. So we were growing our agency business. So it was like literally physically impossible to go out to coffee all day, every day, and respond to all these emails and run a business. And we were getting a lot of these messages because we focused on building our personal brand and our business brand. So we were highly visible, even, back in the early days. So we were like, how can we help as many women founders as possible, but actually do it at scale? So the initial idea for Entreprenista was actually, a podcast like this. Like, we'll start a podcast. We'll share all of these awesome stories of women founders that are growing and scaling businesses. That way, when someone reaches out and says, oh, I want to start a fashion business, we're like, go listen to this episode with Michelle Grant, hear how she grew, scaled, and sold Lively. And now all the information is out there for free on the internet on a podcast. So that was our initial solve. So we launched the podcast, and this is going back, Natasha, this is the end of 2018, November of 2018. We were early in the podcasting days, right? And back then, like, there really were not a lot of other podcasts that were specifically about women founded companies. Like, there's so many, which is amazing, right? It's like you can start a podcast and there's all these awesome voices out there, but back then there were not a lot. So we got a lot of early traction on the podcast right away. So now 2020 happened. So it's like a year after we launched the podcast, 2020, we all know what happens and the world basically ends. Now we're getting all of these messages from listeners of the podcast. We're hearing, I lost my job. I want to start a business. Can you help? I need to pivot. Can you help? And again, Natasha, we were literally doing this podcast on the side of running the agency. This wasn't like a full-time job or business. Like, we just wanted to create this awesome content to help founders. So now we're in the middle of the pandemic, and Courtney and I are like, we have to help everyone. But the only way to do this is going to be if one of us actually focuses on this to really build Entreprenista into now what we've built it in over the past 4.5, almost 5 years now, which is a media company and a membership community. So we actually worked with a business coach. Shout out to Leslie Grossman, who is one of the reasons why this community exists, because she encouraged us to like figure out how to divide and conquer, where Courtney could focus on running the agency and I could start building Entreprenista. And we started figuring out how to build Entreprenista as an actual community and media company. And that started back in 2020. And it took about 10 months for me to like learn everything and figure it out. And it was a huge risk. And Courtney and I invested a lot of our own money initially in building Entreprenista, because it took a lot of, like, it essentially took all of my time. I needed to bring on people to help in the early days to learn how to actually build a business as a community, as a business and a media company. And that is how it actually started. So that is the behind the scenes of the early days of Entreprenista.
That's incredible. So could you have imagined when you started the podcast that it would turn into what it is today?
Yes and no. So like, we always knew with Entreprenista, we're like, there's so much more here that we could be doing with Entreprenista, but we were so focused on growing the agency. And, at that point, we were actually about to, because we just sold the agency last year, and we were about to sell the agency right before the pandemic, but then the pandemic happened. So like we scrapped those plans. So we were always so focused on like, okay, we're going to build this business. We're ultimately going to sell it. And then we can start building Entreprenista. But when the pandemic happened, now we just got back so many hours in a day. We weren't commuting physically into the office anymore. We got clarity on everything. We worked with our business coach, and we were like, we can actually build this now and have Courtney stay focused on Socialfly. We already had a whole team built out, and I could really focus on Entreprenista. So like, when we first started, we always knew there was like so much more we wanted to do and could do, but we didn't picture that we could actually do it until we had like finished what we were going to build with Socialfly. So once we made the choice to like divide and conquer, I had this vision for Entreprenista of now, like where we are right now in the business and everything we've built with Founders Weekend, our award program, and where the community is now. Like, this was my vision, but it took years to get to where we are right now.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, there is so much going on all the time too. And I love it. The excitement, the buzz, like it's especially with the new branding, all the things, the awards. And actually, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned, and as you were growing Entreprenista and I guess it was Socialfly was starting to get applying for awards. You mentioned like someone told you to do that. So I'm assuming mentorship and coaching has been a huge part of this. Like, how did you know to do all these things, right? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So I would say like from day one of starting Socialfly, we always surrounded ourselves with the right people. Now, we got really lucky in the early days that we connected with the right people early on. And it was almost like, we call it like these breadcrumbs. It's like one thing led to the next, led to the next. And you probably like have experienced that in Entreprenista. It's like one introduction leads to the next, and then this person and this person. And like, that's how it unfolded for us. So the day we quit our corporate jobs, May 4th, that Monday, Courtney and I went to work now we had the full day in to be able to say in our office in my apartment on the Upper West Side at the time in New York City. And we get to my apartment. It's 9 a.m. We finally had the whole day to work on our business. And we were like, oh my gosh, like it's summer. We should bring on some interns this summer to help us because we're going to land all of this business right away because now we have all this time, right? So then we're like, oh, wait, we're in my apartment. And this is like before remote work. We're like, where are all these interns going to go once we bring them on? And Courtney remembered that one of her mom's former clients from years ago owned a printing company in Manhattan. So Courtney calls her mom calls Frank, and Frank says, come down to my office. I'm happy to show you my space, happy to connect and help you. So we go meet with Frank. Again, this is literally when we were finally ready to, go full time the first day. He's like, come down, we go meet with him. And he asked us, he's like, how are you going to start getting all your clients? We're like, well, we have the whole day now. Like, we're going to go door to door in New York City. We're going to post on social media. He was like, hold on a second. He's like, let me help you. And he's like, come to my networking group. This is where I get all of my business. And we were like, okay, like, where's this group at? Like, so like a few days later, we go with him to this group and they meet early in the morning. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is how business is getting done. It's people coming together and networking and connecting. And through that group, Natasha, back 12 plus years ago, this is 2012, 13 years ago, it's 2025. Oh my gosh, 13 years ago. That is how we got all of our first clients in our business and how we built all of those initial relationships that then set the stage for everything else that happened. So like through an introduction, we started speaking, we met our business coach. We just saw how business was happening. And like I said, like we got lucky from, Courtney's mom, again, all roads lead back to relationships, had that amazing relationships from years ago. And Frank like just guided us in those early days and it all led to the next thing.
Wow. There is something to be said of like finding those right, like that one person or that one opportunity that then really spirals into leads to so many different things. I feel like that does happen a lot, especially when you're putting out that energy.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that does happen all the time with an Entreprenista because there is such collaboration and openness to support one another that like more of these opportunities seem to just like spiral off. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. When everyone wants to collaborate and connect and help each other. And like, that's what we saw initially from this group. So when we set out to build Entreprenista, because we then ended up joining, we were in that group for a bit and it was all focused on like leads and networking. And then we joined another group to learn how to be really great leaders for our team. And through that group, that's how we met our business coach because she was leading that group. And then we joined a group to learn how to get press for our business. So like we were constantly joining these groups and organizations to learn how to do like specific things that we were learning we needed in the business as we were growing. So then when we set out to create Entreprenista, we were like, how is there not one group that has everything that we've needed as we were growing our business, just all in one place under one roof and platform? So that was my vision. I'm like, I need to bring all of this together so people aren't like feeling they have to ping pong all of these different places.
Yeah, that makes sense. As you're saying that, Michael, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like anything I need, I can, as I'm like building my business, because I joined, and actually, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I joined Entreprenista, I hadn't yet started my business. I was thinking about doing it at some point the following year. And then I went to the first Member Connects. And then I was so inspired by all the women. I was like, wait, why am I working for these guys? Like I could totally do this on my own. And literally a week later, I jumped ship and started my own business.
That's the best.
And one of my first clients was an Entreprenista. She was also in Columbia where I was living at the time in South Carolina. And she like randomly were in the same breakout room in the Member Connect and she wanted to start getting active on LinkedIn. She's like, do you want to meet for dinner tonight? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. We met for dinner. I didn't even have like a name for my business or anything, but she's like, let's start. I'm like, no way, this is happening.
Yes, that's how it happens. So cool. It's the real magic, right?
It really is. So yeah, I appreciate so much like how much it's been in like a huge part of my journey of entrepreneurship and so many women too. And I think that's what's so powerful is having communities like this where it's not like I trust everyone in there that I know anything I need for whatever that next step is, there's somebody I can talk to you about. So I appreciate it.
I love that.
Going back to May 4th, when you guys decided to jump ship and start your full-time Social Fly, how did you know that you were ready to do that? I mean, you were both working your corporate job and Social Fly for how long? Like, what was that pivotal moment when you're like, okay, it's time to go all in?
Yeah. So we had been managing some clients on the side for about 10 months or so. And it just became like too hard for us to only focus on the business at night and on the weekends. Like there was going to be no way that we could actually grow and scale a business on the side. we were young, right? So Courtney was in her early 20s. I was in my mid 20s. We didn't have a lot to lose at that point. So, Courtney had her whole backup plan, but I was like, this is going to work. Like, if we're going to have the time during the day to do this, like, of course we're going to make it happen. So I had no backup plan, but like our backup plan was, if it didn't work for some reason, like we could still obviously go get a job. Right. So like Courtney had that in the back of her mind. I'm like, I'm unemployable. I can only work for myself. So I joke and say that all the time when I say I'm unemployable. Like, sure, I could go get a job somewhere, but like, I don't want to. Like, I love doing what I do and building businesses. So, but I would say for those that are listening and thinking, you're running a business on the side right now, like when should you actually take that leap? The answer really is it depends on everyone's circumstances, right? Because if you need to be sure that you have the time and the money to be able to do it and like the runway, right? So if you're in a position where you're, raising a family, you have mortgages and a certain amount of money that you need to be bringing in every single month, and you haven't proven that your business can generate that yet, that can be really challenging to do, right? You need to be at a place where you have a certain amount of traction in your business where you see that, okay, if you had more time to spend in your business, that you can be almost like guarantee that you'll be able to drive more revenue in your business to build. So it really depends on everyone's unique circumstances. Again, we were super young and we had essentially like no responsibilities aside from paying our rent. So that was the situation that we were in at the time.
Yeah, that's, it might have helped though, that mindset you have of like, I am unemployable, like this is it, like all or nothing. And like by putting that pressure on yourself, like probably lit a fire under you to make sure that this actually worked, right? Like it's not to say that you need to be putting too much pressure on yourself, but like there is something to be said about having that motivation because like, this is it. Like, this is my plan,
And you have to like be so obsessed with your business and what you're building that you're like genuinely excited to wake up and build every day. Like I can't think of a day ever when I haven't been so excited to like get into my office and get on the computer and start working and doing stuff because I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm building. I see the impact that it's making. So like if you're building a business and you can't picture yourself doing that every single day and being excited to do it, even when things are really hard, like even on days when building both businesses, there have been so many hard times, like I can't even count. And we've been through so much. Courtney and I had the joy and privilege of having each other as co-founders. So like we've always had each other. I always feel for solo founders who don't have a partner to be able to connect with and problem solve and talk through ideas. And that's why community is so important because you can find your like mentor buddies and business friends to be able to set up times with and connect. But like I would have, and I say this to Court all the time, like I would have never been able to build these businesses without Courtney. Like we had each other.
Yeah, that is something that is huge for sure. Speaking of, I guess the hard times, obviously entrepreneurship isn't always butterflies and rainbows, and that is amazing that you had Courtney in those moments. So, we talk a lot about this actually with Intermountain about that inner critic, that voice that sometimes isn't the nicest to us, right? Have you ever experienced moments of, self-doubt and criticism that you're like struggling through, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, so many times, right? I always just leaned on talking to mentors, going to other people for advice to help. Like I've always shared, like I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I always want to be surrounded by people who know even more than I do, who I can learn from. Like I just want to keep learning as much as possible because I don't know everything. I only know my experiences and what I've done. And of course, I've learned from so many entrepreneurs over the years from their business experience too, and can share like so much based on what I've learned from other people. But I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to always be asking for help. So in times when I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. I'm like, great. I'm going to find someone who knows how to do it and who knows how to help me. And I don't let that make me feel bad that I don't know how to do something because there's a ton of things that I have no idea how to do. And there's a lot of things that I'm also not great at all. Like Courtney and I have always divided and conquered in business, and she's always focused on operations and finance. And I've focused on marketing and business development. And I'm not good at a lot of things, but I know how to surround myself with the right people.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like you got the yin and yang between the two of you. That's amazing. Like you both know, like have your areas that you excel in, and knowing where you're not good at too, and having the right team to support you with that's what makes for very successful business, I'd say, and leaders, right? Because it's good to know what you're not good at and like what's the highest and best use of your time.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. Well, so speaking of loving your business and being so excited about it all the time, it's so easy to get caught up in that. And I'm curious what advice you would give to, as an example, a new mom who's also very overly ambitious and an overachiever, but wants to find that balance, if there is such a thing, between being a parent and, scaling a business. Asking for a friend.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'll share my learnings just based on my past 5 years of experience having a 5.5-year-old now. I like to call it work-life integration, right? And I've been very fortunate in the sense that I've been able to work from home for the past few years. So, when we first had Molly, we were still in our office in New York City. This is pre-2020. And I literally would cry every morning leaving her and going into the office. Like it was so horrible for me. As much as I loved our business, right? All I wanted was to be close to Molly. Molly is like, all I ever wanted was to have a family and to be a mom. And here I was after, a complicated infertility journey and pregnancy and being in the hospital for 17 weeks and not even knowing if she was going to be okay. And now, 2 months after her being born and in the NICU, like I had to get back to work because like I had literally been out. I mean, I was working remotely from the hospital, but I had, left my dear partner, Courtney, for 6 months and had to get back in. And it was so hard. I would say to everyone, like, give yourself grace. Like it's not easy, especially in those early days, trying to navigate everything and create what works for you. When everything happened with the pandemic, it was very traumatizing. We were in New York City at the time. So I had literally just been through basically a whole year of trauma being in the hospital. And now that happens. And I'm like, I can't stay here and be in this space and be in trauma anymore. Like we have to leave. So we made the decision to move to Florida. But those first few months were extremely, extremely challenging. And we had left at the time and we had stayed with my husband's family down in Tennessee because we like literally couldn't physically be in New York. It was too intense. And I had to, every mama instinct, I would say, listen to your mom instincts. Every mama instinct was like, get out of here and be somewhere where you can be outside and where you can walk around and just feel your best. So we stayed with family down in Tennessee. And then that's when Courtney and I were working with our business coach, Leslie, to make a whole plan to be able to start building Entreprenista. And Courtney and I made this plan to move down to Florida. So now I had like an end goal, right? I had an end goal of like, hey, we're going to be down to Florida by June 1st. So even though it was so challenging, like here I am with a, 10-month-old, not in our space. At that point we had we were with our family for a bit and then ended up renting a house down there, like in this unknown space, none of our stuff, with a little one, trying to manage a business, now trying to start something. It was insane. But I think back, I'm like, I've like the only way I got through everything was just like focusing on the end goal. Like we're going to have our own space soon. We're going to be able to like start over and just giving myself grace, like not trying to be like, I was not hard on myself. I was like, I'm just doing the best I can do each day was my mantra. All I can do is the best I can do each day. So my best advice, give yourself grace. Like you don't have to do and be everything, and things will happen at the right time when they're meant to happen. And just try to get as much sleep as humanly possible and have someone come help you if you can't.
That's interesting. I don't know if I mentioned this. We're actually moving to South Carolina in a couple of weeks. And I think a big part of it too is this, like my baby came 2 months early. And again, I said this to you before we jumped on the call, but like, thank you so much for checking in on me during that time. Cause it is crazy. It was like, especially in the NICU experience, there's nothing that can prepare you for that. And it was really hard I couldn't think about work, but I also couldn't be there all the time. It's just really tough. But coming out of that, we realized like the space that we're in, it was too much. And so we also wanted to be somewhere, like find that like place that's where we can settle, that feels good. And we're like, let's get out of here. And so that's actually part of why we're moving. And it kind of sounds a little similar of like, we need that that environment that's going to be the best suited for our family and that's going to fit us. And until then, I'm trying to be a little bit calm about everything.
Yeah.
And not like, I'm not going to be back to how things were just, before I had Dominic. And so I need to like give myself that grace for sure. So
yeah. And
I
one
appreciate
day
that.
at a time. It's like so nice just having this like end goal. It's like, okay, I just have to get through the next few weeks until we get here. And then you're eventually going to get settled. And I just kept telling myself like, one more day, like
One more
keep
day.
going. Yeah.
Okay. And so, and once you got to that, once you got into your place in Florida and now you're able to have a different goal now, right? Because you're in the right place. How did you go about goal setting? Like, what does that look like?
I'm like, and then we got to that house and had a problem in that house. One challenge that led to the next. You know what it is, Natasha? I feel like my whole life, I've just constantly been dealing with like challenges always pop up. And I've just learned how to ask for help, share what's going on, and just navigate these challenges. Like I'm just so used to these things happening now. We got to that house, and after a few months, I got really sick in that house, and there was black mold in the house. We ended up having to move. It was a whole ordeal, but there was a short period of time in those first few weeks. I'm like, wow, I can actually sit here, and I have like my own office now. I can focus. It was a good experience for a couple of months there. But how did we set goals? Well, at that point, I'm trying to go back now to that summer of 2020. That is like right around when Courtney and I were really starting to focus on how I was going to start building Entreprenista. We just set goals of like, okay, here's what we want to do. Here's what we think we need to learn and build to get to the next point. And here's what we're willing to invest in the company to build it. Wrote it down on paper. Like that's what I would say. If you have goals, write it down and then keep track of how you're progressing. And I knew what I needed to do, and I was not going to let anything get in my way. So write down those goals.
Yeah, that kind of holds yourself accountable for sure that way.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I love asking all my guests is, especially as busy entrepreneurs and you've got so many things going on, self-care sometimes takes a stage on the back burner, which it shouldn't. But have you found a non-negotiable self-care routine that you've incorporated into your daily routine?
Yes, I have. Well, I'll tell you the weekly thing that I do now that is my non-negotiable. And that is a little over a year ago, I started working out with a trainer once a week to get me into the gym and to take care of my body and just get on a exercise routine, because literally for like 5 years, I did not work out, like from going through my fertility journey. And then I couldn't work out through my complicated pregnancy, and then had Molly, couldn't get back into it right away. Then the pandemic happened, and then everyone was inside, and I was just trying to survive. And then a little over a year ago, I'm like, I'm ready. I have to take care of myself. So I started working with a trainer, and that has been like the biggest help for me. And now what I've been doing, and I did this right before we recorded today, I do my very best every single day to get up out of my desk and I walk around my neighborhood for a walk during the day, which has been so helpful.
I saw one of those on Instagram, and it's so fun. You're taking us on that journey, and it's just another way where I feel like you're connecting. I know you're connecting one to many, but it feels one to one. It's so personal the way you interact with everybody. I love it so much.
Oh, I just love connecting with everyone. And I always try to use like what I'm doing as just a way to like remind other people to like get up and get going, get out of your chair, like just help other people, because my daughter literally would not be here if it were not for social media and me sharing what we were going through community and through connections. Like that is how I connected with the right doctors and the right resources to be able to help with everything we were going through. And I've always just shared to be able to help other people, but really it's helped me so much. Like these genuine, real, authentic connections with other people. Like at the end of the day, like we're all the same, right? We all are just trying to build businesses. Some of us create families and just have a really great life. And when we're all able to come together and connect and be together, it's just, there's nothing better. We're all the same when we connect.
I just like full body goosebumps. I love it. And it's because it's so genuine and true what you're saying. And I can feel it again. And like, it's truly amazing what you're doing, because it's also contagious, right? Like you doing that, it is that ripple effect that we're talking about. Like it is so contagious, and it's creating even bigger community of more women and men doing this as well. And I think it's just magical. I'm so grateful to be a part of this and to have met you. And I can't wait to see all that comes from what you're building and creating. So,
oh my gosh. Thank you, Natasha. Yeah. I love it.
No, of course. Well, thank you. And I appreciate you so much for coming today and joining us. I know you've been a little bit sick, and it's always amazing when you just still I don't know how you do everything you do, basically. So
I do the best that I can do each day, because I can't, it sounds like I do it all, but you can't, none of us can do it all, right? We can do a little bit each day. And again, when we give ourselves grace and we do the best we can do each day, that's all that matters. I have a lot of emails in my inbox that are unresponded to. So there's a lot of things that I'm not able to get to, but I give myself grace that I'm doing the best I can do.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, what is the best way for our members, our listeners to get in contact with you?
Yes, I'd love to connect with everyone. So you can reach out to me directly if you want to connect on Instagram, personally on Instagram at Steph Jill Cartin, and also over on LinkedIn as well. And then, of course, for anyone who wants to come join us in the Entreprenista community, you can learn more at entreprenista.com/join. And can't wait to connect with everyone. We are all over social media at Entreprenistas. You can't miss us.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Climb. Not ready for your journey to end? Make sure to join our online community and subscribe to our YouTube channel to discover your true spirit, strength, and potential today. Details in the show notes below. Need a guide for your journey? Check out our founder, Diane Wong's new book, The Inner Mountain.
Until next time, remember, you're an experiment. Focus on your own path and continue to climb your inner mountain. Thank you.